All right, hello and welcome back to yet another tutorial in Maya. Now, last week we kind of looked at how to create an underwater scene and sort of how to work with that preset underwater scene. Well, this week, what I want to take a look at is basically the same preset, but this is for an above water simulation. So right here you see I have a QuickTime movie. It's called Silver Seas Test. And if I play this, by default, this is what that scene looks like. And it's a preset in Maya. And it looks like I'm getting hung up here a little bit. Yeah, sometimes that happens. But anyway, as you can see, it's a preset, and it sort of mimics just an ocean, or a stormy kind of ocean. So really, I'm going to pause that for a second because that's getting annoying. Sometimes it gets hung up depending on if I have this screen flick program open. So anyway, always technical glitches. Okay, so you can see where this preset gives us sort of an ocean with some foam going on here, and it looks pretty good, and that's basically just the default. But really, what we have to learn how to do with this default is change all of its parameters so that you can get a different color sky, and that you can get some different colors in your ocean down here. And that's sort of critical because the default just looks like this, and it's set up that way for a reason. They sort of let you play around with the ability to either raise your wave height up or down and mess around with that, and they sort of start this preset out at a default range, and you're going to have to tweak this. So let's go in and find out how to really make this thing look good. And in the end, essentially what I've done is switched it over so now it looks something like that. So there's an incredible amount of flexibility in sort of changing the colors on your ocean and the colors of your sky and stuff. So with that in mind, let's take a look at first, before I show you the preset, let's just look at what I did here. I basically switched the color of the sky with the shader, and that's about it, really. Except I played around with the parameters in here because this test that I did before right here, is the ocean sort of looks gelatinous. You'll notice that it doesn't have any spray or anything like that because it's basically just a moving mesh with an animated texture. So anyway, you get the idea. It's sort of yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to be doing a lot of rendering here, so let's just take a look at. Let's go back to Maya and take a look at where this scene is sort of starting at. Let's see if I can find Maya there. All right, so here's where I am so far. I've opened up the preset and I've messed around with some shading on the color of the sky, or the fog, basically. So it's important when you're dealing with this preset anyway, to open up your hypershade and get familiar with what's in here and how this scene is set up. Right now I have this fluid shape graphed, and that's basically the colors of what this fluid container right here is. And you'll notice that I have it's a fluid shape, and so that's fluid shape 1, and under the tab section you'll see fluid shape 1. And that's cool because this just shows us the network of what's plugged into here. So if we look at this from the top down, you'll notice you have lots of properties, a ton of stuff to play around with here, but we're not going to go into all of that. We're just going to look at what this fluid container is. Well, it's just containing fog, and it's not moving or anything like that. It's just sort of adding a diffusion to the scene. So this is really cool. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff up here. All right. But what you'll notice in this fluid shape 1 node is that by default, these values look much different. They look like the original, default. And now, because I switched the incandescent values, that's controlling the color of this sky. So a lot of times the ocean doesn't just look gray. I mean, it changes, 6, 7, 8 times a day. It looks completely different. You look at it 10 minutes, 20 minutes later, and oh, wow, it's completely different. So anyway, that's what we're looking at to control the color on our fluid shape, is this incandescent value. And I just reset the values of that ramp, and you can play around with these all day long, or maybe weeks. Go ahead and have fun with it. Play around with it for weeks. But that's essentially what we're controlling there. Okay? So that's where you'll find the first controls of being able to set your controls for the sky. Now, if you come into your materials, you'll notice that there's, say, an ocean shader. And choose your choose tool. Make sure you can choose your ocean shader. And in this case, I'm going to clear the graph by just going to Graph, Clear Graph. And I'm going to click on my ocean shader, and let's graph those by just going to Graph, Input and Output Connections. And now you can see where, there's a lot of stuff connected to this. And what we're interested in the moment is maybe this ocean preview. So if you click on your ocean preview, you'll have basically an ocean preview plane. And by default, you can't really change your colors here, but what we have to look at is coming into the ocean shader, attributes. And we'll just go up to the top and take a look at some of these. And by default, I'll tell you what, let's open this scene up, and I'll show you how to get there, and we'll just start with a new scene. Okay, so just go ahead and create a new scene. I'm just going to go to File, New Scene. I don't need to save that. Okay, now I have a scene, and maybe set it for like maybe 400 frames, because you could loop this ocean scene. You don't need to render out 1200 frames or 800. You could even get by with 200 frames. So let's do that. Let's just go to 200 frames and make sure everything's set. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we got 200 frames. Now, where you'll find this preset is in your rendering menu subset here. Just go over to Paint Effects, come down to Get Brush, and you should get your visor, which will look like that. And what we're interested here is in ocean examples, and in particular we want to create this high seas right here. So make sure your choose tool's on, make sure you can highlight that in yellow, right click and go to Import Maya File HighSeas.ma. Alright, now you'll notice right away here's the scene that we get. So let's do a quick render for reference. And here's what that scene looks like to start with. And by default it looks pretty good. I mean it's a pretty good looking ocean. You can do a lot of stuff with this. It's pretty cool. And you'll notice your fog right there and everything else. Well, let's take a little bit different angle on it. Maybe just go to something like that. And you'll notice that there's a directional light in here. Here is the plane of the ocean, and then here's basically our horizon. Well, let's take a quick render for reference, and there we go. So you'll notice right away what's wrong with it. It doesn't really have foam, and it doesn't really have, I see some banding up here that we can correct, and you always want to look at the, basic size of what this container is. So let's take a look at that first, because that's kind of cool. It's one of the first parameters you're probably going to want to look at, is what size this kind of is. So I'll tell you what, let's bring that aside and select this shape right here. We'll basically go back and we'll just go to the choose tool and grab this guy right here, and you'll notice that that is our fluid shape 1. And here was the incandescent value that we're starting with, which looks like that. And you can notice where this kind of mimics what this is. So you saw how we tweaked it out in the beginning. Well, that's where you're going to go back to to get a little bit different color on your incandescent values. But anyway, what we're interested in right now is this banding right here. And if you go up to the top of your attributes, your container properties, you'll notice that this is like a 20 by 2 by 20. Well, that is basically just showing that this is, 20 by 20 by 2. So, I'm going to mess with that a little bit. And we're going to take a look at what that does. Let's take a quick render right here. And you'll notice that you still see that banding right there. Well, let's maybe up the size a little bit, give the container a little bit more height. Let's just go to like 4 or something like that. And let's take another render. And as you can see, that banding starts to disappear, which is really cool. I can still see it in here. You can see it kind of a cube shape. So I could maybe bring that up to 5. But anyway, that's where that little you got to look for a smooth sky. I mean, sometimes you just don't want to see a nice, and unless you had some clouds in here or something. But for the most part, a good gradation on the sky is kind of nice. So that's where you find it. Okay, let's go on to look at a couple more things here that have to do with this fluid 1. You'll notice that you have, we're not really simulating or doing any dynamics with it. It's just fog. So really there's nothing you have to worry about in your containers here with like density or reactions or anything like that. And by default, a lot of this stuff is just set and you can't really vary a lot. So that's cool. But once again, go to your incandescence. And if you want to play around with the opacity level of this incandescent value, you can bring the peak down a little bit. It just sort of lightens up it kind of lightens up the fog. So anyway, opacity is just that. How see-through is it? And you could, tweak it out to whatever you want. So opacity's cool. And that's about it. A lot of these are just going to be, default settings. You can't really change too much. In the lighting aspect, watch what happens when we go ambient color. Maybe I want to switch that over to a color like this. Well, let's see what a quick render looks like. Not much change at all, because basically this stuff is set by default. So in the lighting section, we're not really going to be able to change. It's not going to have an effect. So anyway, just something to be aware of. Now, check this out though. You have all that, but what if we were to look at this scene a little bit deeper, and maybe go into the hypershade and take a look at. Let's take a look at. Well, let's see. What do we want? Well, we want to take a look at the lighting. So let's look at our lights for a moment. In this scene, we have a directional light, and that's pretty much, if I get all this stuff out of the way, that's pretty much what it is. It's just a directional light. So we could maybe change that color of the directional light, and let's just do something extreme like a red, and take another quick render. Okay, so you can see where, changing the color of your directional light first and foremost has a pretty big effect, and, that looks kind of cool, I've never seen the ocean look like, well, sometimes it does when it reflects like late night rays, but you'd have to have clouds and a supporting sky to do that. So really, if we change the color right here to like say a red, we want to kind of mimic something maybe like that up there in the sky. So let's come back here and let's just choose that fluid shape, and let's come back up in here. All right, there it is. Let's come back up into that. Slow down, Maya. It's going crazy. Okay, so anyway, our incandescent value right here, that's what we want to change to kind of match something that is like that. So let's take a look. Let's go from lowest to highest. Here we know that we could maybe go with like a deep red. And once we set that value, let's see, let's just sort of subdue it a little bit. Make it deep red there, and then we'll just kind of extend it out and make this like more like an orange. So let's go to a mid red, something like that, and then maybe something like this. We'll go to like an orange or something. So just find a nice gradation of something or other, and let's check it out now and do a quick render. And you'll notice that it's now looking kind of like the same environment. And if you put the clouds, there is a tutorial for doing that. You can put some clouds in there and animate them, and there you have a really cool kind of offbeat scene of the ocean. And right now I'm on Maya software. You can switch over to mental ray, and let's just see what a mental ray of that looks like. All right. It looks pretty good, but really we want to look at seeing if it can look even better. So in this case, I might, let's go to the render settings. So click on your render settings there and bring up those, and let's just change the quality right here to say something like, production quality, default, whatever. Right now I'm in draft, and that's not good. Okay, so go over to your production. Let's look at it a little bit better. And, on your features here, I'm going to show you something. We'll take a quick render, and everything will start to look really good because mental ray is cool. But you'll notice that you got some weird stuff down here and whatnot. It looks like it's trying to pick up reflections from the sky and stuff like that. So really you might want to look at your features and say, well, do I need ray tracing on? Because ray tracing is just sort of like, really heavily calculating lots of stuff. So if you turn that off, I think we'll see a difference in the way this looks. So let's take a look there. But I mean, it's all different for all sorts of different reasons, but you get the idea. It's you don't really need to cast shadows from your objects onto this ocean. So if you have lights in here, just turn your shadows off because you don't really need them, and that's cool. So anyway, that's a little bit about color, and that's going to really be like the key to making different ocean scenes look really cool. Now, by default, this wave pattern is kind of jelly-like. So until you do a full sequence rendering, you're really not going to know what you get. It's going to be very difficult to distinguish kind of how those wave patterns are coming out. But let's take a look at that real quick. I'm going to just sort of select, I didn't want to select everything. Let's see here. Sometimes you might have to open up that outliner and then pick your, let's see, I want to pick that plane. See, if you open the outliner, you can kind of get an idea of what they did with this scene and how simple it is. You have a NURBS plane, and that's right here, and that's sort of containing the ocean. You have a directional light and a fluid one right there, and that's about it. They have a cam that they included in here as a preset cam. You have a couple of little transform nodes. But what we're interested right now is in probably the ocean shader. Okay, and if you click on that ocean shader, here's the ocean and here is the shader. Now let's do a quick render, kind of, at an angle we might be on the ocean at, and let's see what it looks like. Now this is kind of an extreme look right now, but as you can see, it's shaping up, but it's got no foam, and we really don't know what the properties of the waves are. But if you push play down here and just sort of take an eyeball at how this is moving around, and that kind of gives you an idea of really what your ocean is going to look like. Now the first things to look at is, do I want it looking like that? Because even though this is a high seas kind of rambunctious ocean, you may not want it to be, you may want it to be a mellow ocean. So if I slow down my wave speed quite a bit and go ahead and hit play, you'll notice that it sort of has a little bit better flow to it. If I were just to sort of stop it and do a random render, this is what we had last time. Here's what we have this time. And the ocean looks kind of smoother and a little more calm. So anyway, you get the idea. It basically is just that. It's a wave speed. Another thing you can look at too is the number of frequencies, because right now we have frequencies, like 12 frequencies in here. So I'm going to bring this over and we'll do some quick renders here. I'll bring that down from 12. Let's do a quick render of this. Okay, so there it is at 12. And we'll bring the frequencies down to say maybe like 4. And that'll just give us an extreme. And take a look. And there you go. So now we have kind of a mellow ocean. And just by playing around with your different attributes here, you can really set up any kind of simulation you want on your ocean. So if you have objects cruising through there, they'll pick up these colors, and if you have the right materials assigned to them, it'll look really cool. So anyway, you get the idea. I still see a little bit of banding there, but that doesn't really concern me. I mean, whatever. As you'll notice that the wave height right now is right there, and essentially maybe I want the wave height to be a little bit more. You can mess around with your wave height values by just playing around with this scale over here. So go ahead and play around on that. It kind of gives them a little bit more height. So that's what that's all about, wave height. Just extreme or not extreme. So by default, they don't really have much turbulence assigned to this. The peaking, they have wave peaking, and it this is what this reflects right here. If we wanted to reset some things, I might want to maybe make that a little larger by clicking, on its enlargement there. And as you can see here, they're like that. What if we were to bring the values down by just grabbing these guys right here, and we'll take another render. And yeah, brought them down a little bit. You can kind of tell they're a little bit not quite. They're a little more rounded and whatnot. So anyway, you get the idea. You can play around with that all you want. It's best just to open up this scene and play around with it like this. So now we have a little bit better peaking. You can kind of see. I might even want to add another point in there and sort of check it out. Okay, so now I'm having some peaking. I don't know. You can compare till the cows come home. All right, so that's what we're all about there. Now, foam. Let's look at foam here for a second, because right now there's not much foam on there. And you want to kind of look at this ocean shader and your foam and kind of see where it appears here. This is the shader itself, and a lot of times you'll want to add foam, but you kind of don't really have a starting point necessarily. You have an emission right here, and if you bring up foam emission, you still don't really get much. I'll go ahead and do a render there. There's no foam, okay, but what we want is we want foam. So we do have like a threshold here, and we have emission. So what if we were just to crank that emission way up? Well, there's still nothing there. Let's crank our threshold up quite a bit. Okay, well, now you see what happened is that let's set our foam emission kind of like in the quarter level, and look at this threshold for a second. The threshold controls how much foam you're going to see on here. So you really have to work over the certain point and then start working yourself under. And as you sort of find a balance right in there, you'll notice that in your material sample right here that it'll start to show up. So let's look at that threshold. Maybe I want this much foam, so we'll go ahead and do a quick render and see if we have foam. Wow, we have we have a lot of foam. So really you can see what it's doing there. Let's bring it down a little bit. Let's bring that threshold down just a little bit. Right now I'm at 0.613. What if I brought it to, like, say 0.500? I might lose it. Yeah, I lost it. So let's go to 0.550. All right, and let's see what that does. All right, you get the idea. There is some foam, so maybe we want to go to 0.580 or something like that. Yeah. All right, you get the idea. That's getting some foam into the scene. If you have really rough seas or whatnot, now you're getting your foam, which is cool. Okay, so we're almost done. Let's take one look at the environment. this is sort of for the overall environment, and it does affect things, but in some cases I'm not using that. But you can go ahead and feel free to play around with your environment on a scene and just see what it does when you change some of these parameters, okay? So that's about it. You'll have a lot of other things here, and in rendering is really important. So get everything looking the right way before you pull a render, and remember that in a scene like this, generally you can end up looping it and maybe doing a cross dissolve transition, and it would blend in fine with the composition. So that is it. Okay, well, we got it all in 25 minutes, and I commend you for taking the time to learn this stuff with me, and go through it. And if you're from another country, I commend you for learning English and watching this tutorial, because it must be hard. I understand. So anyway, thanks for all the kind words that everyone sort of sends me here and there. And as always, read a book, preferably the owner's manual, an Autodesk Cybex book. Get your hands on one, because they will really help you, because I refer to them all the time, and I think every one of you can get them and learn from them as well. So, and there you go. So be a good person, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next tutorial. Have a great weekend.